So this is a short summary of my major project and ideas for my major project. And it's going to be based on either something like tripolar, which is like bipolar, but 3 rather than 2, or perception or framing. And previous projects that I've done are about time and history and looking at family photographs. I also like social stories because I work in a hospice, so I think that has an influence in how I think. And so in my first term, I did a project on reflections, and that was looking at some of my adult children's old toys and old things that they had as a child, because they'd recently moved out of the home, and just looking at the contrast between the young and the old and the small and the large. In term 2, I did a project called Let's Go Round Again, and that was looking at some of my mum's old images. She's 84 now, but looking at her when from 14, 15 years old in this first image. And I got some of my family members to recreate a model for her. So this is my niece when she was 16, so recreating the image of my mum. So the initial ideas, as I said, were based on my dad. My dad had bipolar. He died 18 years ago. He's very special to me, and both him and his bipolar really influenced my life in the way that I see things. So it is about perception and reframe, and thinking about how one person can look at something, how different people can look at the same thing but come up with a different feeling. And so this was when I explained my initial ideas. This was written for a 7-year-old. So it was talking about 3 different feelings as bipolar is. So there is obviously there's the depressed, there's the well, and there's the manic phases of bipolar. But it was thinking that, sometimes he might have felt very sad, sometimes he would have felt elated, and other times he'd been either happy or sad. And the images might not necessarily be something that make good wall art, but they would be something to look at for the viewer to get an emotion about perhaps mental health, and how mental health can be quite confusing for the person. So artist research, I want to look at Fenn's farming because he was a farmer. So I want to revisit his farm and base the images around the farm and my dad, bipolar and mental health. And Rinko Kawachi, one of the photographers that I liked, does some similar images in terms of overexposed, underexposed, mainly overexposed actually with Rinko Kawachi. So looking at her style. Critical reading. This is a book that was my dad's. It has my grandfather in it. As images of fen workers. So the image of my dad was, my granddad was overseeing a gang who were digging out a ditch. And looking at other photographers, this was another recommendation from my tutor. So these were some of the gradual changes of mental health and bipolar, because it isn't always 3. So I think as the daughter of my dad who had bipolar, I probably saw those discrete changes before other people. So it isn't always depressed one day, manic another. It kind of is a sliding scale of going up and down. So these are example of the 3. The previous one is example of a gradual changes. Another example of the 3. So obviously black and white and highly calibrated. So, to almost look unreal. And the same again, sort of highly overexposed, distorted on the right, because that's sometimes how I perceived that his manic phase was, and the depressed stage was very dark. So you could he didn't always see the beauty in things when he was depressed. These are examples of a landscape. It's not his farm, these are just experimental ones, but thinking along these lines. And again, out in the wildlife and natural landscape. More of natural landscape. So again, black and white, overexposed. And something similar, but I don't want to be too repetitive. So this is something that I need to think about. So, and that was in my reflections really, that the images need to be extremes to create the emotion. I think sliding scale was okay, but I think I can't, if I'm going to do 3, just do it too discreetly, because that's not what bipolar was like. And not at the 2 extremes of either end of depressed or manic, and also how to display the images. You know, do I do rolling changes? Do I do side by side? Do I do next to each other? I mean, for me, bipolar was kind of a very much kind of either going up or coming down. So perhaps sort of looking at a roller coaster. And next steps are to visit the farm that my dad owned, take photos, take some photos, perhaps some old photos of him in that environment, and kind of see how my creative juices get stimulated there. And also I need to do some more research in terms of whether I'm going to do a photo book or an exhibition.